The restaurant lights were still warm when he said it, standing in the doorway like a stranger. I remember the smell of bread in the air and the way his voice stayed calm when mine couldn't. I spent years building a small restaurant at the edge of town, a place that smelled of wood polish, morning coffee, and quiet hope. It was never loud or glamorous, just steady, honest work done mostly alone. My husband liked to call it our dream, though he was rarely there. I believe the hardest part was already behind me. The chairs were upside down when I unlocked the door, with legs in the air, seat bottoms catching the pale blue of morning through the front windows. The street outside hadn't woken yet. No engines, no footsteps, just the hum of the refrigerator behind the bar, steady as breathing. I stood there a moment longer than I needed to, keys still in my hand, listening to the quiet settle back into place. This was my favorite hour, before voices, before opinions, before the room learned how to perform for other people. I walked the length of the dining room slowly, my shoes soft against the floor I'd mopped myself the night before. I turned chairs right side down, one by one, lining them up with the care you give something living. A thumb smoothed the edge of a table. I straightened a napkin that hadn't moved since yesterday. Everything was where I left it. Everything was still mine. The permits were pinned behind the counter, laminated and neat. Health inspection, fire clearance, business registration. My name printed clearly at the top of every page. Same font, same spelling. Proof, if I ever needed it, that I had been here for all of it. I used to feel proud looking at those papers. Now they felt fragile, like leaves pressed into a book. I moved into the kitchen, flicked on the lights, and the stainless steel woke up with a dull shine. The smell of yeast lingered from yesterday's dough. A faint trace of onions clung to the cutting board. Familiar things, comforting things, work that stayed where you put it. I brewed the first pot of coffee and let it drip slowly, steam rising like it had something to say. I leaned against the counter while it finished, palms flat, shoulders easing down. For a moment, it was just me and the room again. Then the door creaked. He didn't knock. He never did, just stepped inside like he was passing through. "You're early," he said, glancing at his watch even though he always did that. "I always am." He smiled. The polite kind. The kind you give a cashier when you're already late. He kissed my cheek, quick and distracted, and scanned the room like he was seeing it for the first time. "Looks great," he said. "You always make it look easy." I watched him straighten a chair I'd already fixed. Watched his fingers hover over the counter without touching anything. He smelled like outside, like movement. "I won't stay," he added.
You, Mother.
"Just wanted to check in.
It means
Check
a great
in.as
deal.
if this place needed supervision. .as if I hadn't been checking on it every morning for years." He took his phone out, thumb already moving, and said, almost casually, "Mom asked how things were going." There it was, light as dust, settling anyway. I poured coffee into 2 mugs without thinking. Set one in front of him. He didn't notice. "She's proud of you," he said. "Always tells people about the restaurant." I nodded. The coffee was too hot. I held the mug anyway. "That's nice," I said. He leaned back against the counter, eyes drifting to the windows. "She's got such a head for these things," he went on. "Business, I mean. Always has." The refrigerator hummed louder, or maybe I was listening harder. "I learned everything from her," he added, smiling like that explained something important. I thought of the nights I closed alone, the mornings I opened alone, the calls I made, the loans I signed. I thought of my name on the permits again, pinned like quiet witnesses. "She should come by sometime," he said. "Take a look around." "She already has," I said. "A few times." He paused, just a fraction. Enough for me to notice. "Well," he said, adjusting his jacket, "she likes to feel involved." Involved. The word sat between us unfinished. He checked his watch again, picked up his phone. "I've got to run," he said. "But really, this place? You did something special here." He kissed my cheek again. Same spot. Same hurry. Then he was gone, the door swinging closed behind him with a soft final sound. The room felt larger after that, and emptier. I stood there a while, coffee cooling in my hands, staring at the chairs. At the tables. At the spaces where people would sit later and talk about things they hadn't built. I told myself not to read into it. Families share dreams. That's what I said in my head. That's what I'd always said. His mother meant well. She was proud. She was curious. She cared. Still, her name lingered in the room longer than his footsteps had. I went back to work. Set menus. Folded towels. checked the register even though I knew the numbers by heart. I moved through the motions the way you do when you're trying not to think. But every empty chair felt like it was waiting for someone else now. When the sun finally lifted enough to touch the front windows, the light spread across the floor in thin gold lines. It made the room look gentle, forgiving, almost innocent. I stood in the doorway and looked back once more before the day arrived. The restaurant was quiet, .my name was still on the wall. And yet, something had already begun to shift, softly, without asking, like a chair moved just slightly out of place. The lights above the sink buzzed when I turned them on, that faint electrical sound that always came before the rest of the room woke up. It was late, past midnight. The kind of hour that doesn't belong to anyone but the tired. I stood there with my sleeves rolled up, water running hot over my hands, watching soap slide down the drain like it didn't want to stay. I used to think this was the work that didn't count, the quiet work, the unseen part. The floor was still damp from where I'd mopped, my reflection broken in the streaks. I knelt down anyway, scrubbing the corner by the back door where grease liked to hide. My knees ached. I didn't stop. The radio on the counter played low, some old song I'd heard 100 times, the kind that feels softer when no one's listening. I remembered other nights like this, too many to count. Holidays spent here instead of home. Birthdays marked by a cupcake eaten standing up. Messages from friends I didn't answer because my hands were busy, or tired, or both. I told myself it was temporary. That's what he said too. Just for now, he'd tell me. Once it takes off, things will even out. Even out. I held on to those words like they were a plan. The loans were tucked into a folder under the register, edges worn from being opened and closed so many times. My name sat at the bottom of every page, signature after signature. Ink slightly faded where my pen had pressed too hard. I didn't remember signing them feeling scared. I remembered feeling responsible. Someone had to believe in it enough to sign. In the mornings, I'd open the restaurant with the same care I closed it. Wipe the counter, check the fridge, straighten the chairs. Routine can feel like safety if you let it. I let it. Then his mother started coming by more often. At first, it was small things. A comment about the menu. A suggestion about the lighting. She'd walk slowly through the dining room, fingers brushing the backs of chairs, eyes sharp but quiet. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. "This table could seat more if you turned it," she said once, already moving it before I answered. I smiled, said thank you. That's what you do when someone older takes interest. When family shows support. She asked about costs one afternoon while I was counting receipts. Not casually, precisely. "And staffing?" she added, looking up at me like she was measuring something invisible. I told her, because I didn't know not to. My husband stood beside her, nodding, listening, his hands folded in front of him the way they were when he was being serious. He didn't look at me while she spoke. He looked at her. I noticed it then, the way his posture shifted, the way his attention leaned. Later that night, when we closed together for once, I mentioned it. Not accusing, just curious. "She means well," he said, stacking chairs without meeting my eyes. "She's just trying to help." I watched him straighten a chair that didn't need it. "She's good with numbers," he added. "You know that." I did know that. What I didn't know was when her numbers started matching more than mine. Her visits became regular, predictable. Tuesdays and Fridays, always mid-morning. She'd arrive just as the lunch prep began, coat still on, perfume lingering after she passed. She asked about vendors, margins, waste. She never asked how tired I was. I found myself explaining things I'd never had to explain before, defending decisions that had worked for years, wondering when I'd stop being enough on my own. Once, while she was talking, I looked down at my hands. The skin was dry, cracked at the knuckles. A thin scar crossed my thumb from a broken glass months back. I remembered how it bled while I kept working, how I wrapped it in tape and kept going. I remembered him saying, "You don't have to do everything yourself." But somehow I always did. One evening, after she left, I stood alone in the dining room again. Chairs empty, lights dimmed. The room felt different now, like it had learned another voice. I thought about the loans, the nights, the promises, how patience had slowly turned into habit, and habit into expectation. He came up behind me then, hands light on my shoulders. "She's excited," he said softly. "She feels connected to this place." Connected. I swallowed. I nodded, because that was easier than saying what I felt. But something inside me shifted. Not sharply, Not all at once. More like the ground settling after a long time pretending it was still. I walked to the counter and ran my fingers over the worn edge where I'd stood 1,000 times. I looked at the permits on the wall again. My name's still there. Clear. Undeniable. And yet, it felt like I was standing on borrowed ground. That night, when I locked the door and turned the sign to closed, the click sounded louder than usual. Final in a way that lingered. I stood there a moment longer, key still in my hand, feeling the weight of everything I'd signed, everything I'd believed. The debt wasn't just money anymore. .it was quiet, and it was growing. As I stepped into the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that something beneath me was moving, slowly, deliberately, deciding where I would land when it finally gave way. The table was already set when we arrived. White cloth pulled tight, plate centered, silverware aligned like someone had measured the space between each fork and knife. The room smelled like roasted meat and something sweet cooling on the counter. A candle burned in the middle, its flame steady, as if it knew how the evening was supposed to go. I took my seat slowly. The chair legs scraped softly against the floor. Family dinners used to feel warm to me. No rush, no clock watching, just voices layered over one another, passing dishes, telling stories that didn't need endings. That night felt different, polished, observed, like a photograph someone else had already framed. His mother sat at the head of the table. She always did, hands folded, back straight. She smiled when she saw me, the kind of smile that didn't move much. "You look tired," she said, gently. I nodded. "It's been busy." "That's good," she replied. "Busy means successful." My husband sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He poured wine without asking, filling her glass first. I watched the dark red climb the sides, stop just before the rim. The food was passed. Compliments followed quickly, as if rehearsed. "This is wonderful," she said. "You've done such a good job with everything." Everything. The word landed heavy. My husband smiled, proud. "It's really taken off," he said.
Be here
"People are noticing."
now.
I waited. My name didn't come. He talked
There's
about long
no
hours,
turning back.
about stress, about believing in the idea when it was still just a thought. He spoke as if the work had happened around him, not through me. As if effort were something he'd supervised.
It's already 8:15.
His mother nodded along, eyes never leaving him.
We need
"I always
to
knew
leave
you'd
now.
do something like this," she said. "You were like that even as a boy. Always driven." She turned to me then. "It's nice you were able to help him." Helped. I felt my shoulders stiffen. I cut my food carefully. Small bites. Chewed slowly. The sound of forks against plates filled the space where my voice might have been. Conversation shifted to numbers. Growth. What could come next? His mother asked questions with confidence, already shaping answers. "There's potential here," she said. "Real potential. Something lasting. Legacy, she called it. Something built to be handed down. I gave my whole life raising him," she continued. "Sacrifices people don't see. You understand that, I'm sure." I did understand sacrifice, that I just didn't understand how mine had disappeared from the room. My husband reached for her hand. A brief squeeze. "You deserve to see the reward," he said. Deserve. The word settled between us like a final course. I looked at him then. He didn't look back. His eyes were fixed on her, warm and certain. The candlelight caught his face, softened it. Made him look younger. Protected. I thought about the nights I'd closed alone. The mornings I'd opened before dawn. The holidays missed. The papers signed. The quiet choices that never made it to a dinner table. No one asked me about those. The conversation moved on without me. Plans spoken aloud. Ideas layered on top of one another. It sounded like a future already agreed upon. I smiled when expected. Nodded when pauses appeared. My hands rested in my lap. Fingers laced tight enough to feel the pulse in my wrists. At one point, his mother leaned back and studied the table, satisfied. "It's good when family works together," she said. "When everyone knows their place." I felt the floor beneath my feet, solid and unmoving, for the moment. Dessert was served. The candle burned lower. Plates were cleared. The evening wound down like it had followed a script. As we stood to leave, his mother kissed his cheek and held it there a second longer than necessary. She touched my arm lightly. "You've done well," she said again. "We all have." We. In the car, the silence pressed in. The road hummed beneath the tires, steady and indifferent. "You were quiet," my husband said finally. "I was listening," I replied. He nodded, as if that explained everything. As if listening were all that was required of me now. Streetlights passed in a slow rhythm, lighting his face, then leaving it in shadow again. He didn't reach for my hand. I didn't offer it. When we pulled into the driveway, I stayed seated a moment after the engine stopped. The house loomed ahead, dark and familiar. A place where my voice usually lived. Inside, I took off my coat and hung it carefully. The fabric whispered as it settled. I stood there longer than necessary, feeling the echo of the evening in my chest. At the kitchen table, I ran my fingers over the wood, worn smooth by years of use. My table. My chair. My quiet. I realized then that my dream hadn't been taken all at once. It had been rewritten, spoken over, folded neatly into someone else's story while I sat close enough to hear it happen. I turned off the light and stood in the dark, listening to the house settle around me. When did my dream become something I was no longer invited to speak about? The question stayed with me, unanswered, as I climbed the stairs, a soft, steady weight, waiting for the moment it would finally demand a reply. The window was cracked open, just enough to let the late afternoon in. Dust moved slowly in the light, drifting like it had nowhere else to be. I stood at the counter, folding invoices into a neat stack, listening to the building breathe. The restaurant always sounded older at this hour. Wood ticking, pipes cooling, the floor settling into itself. He came in quietly, didn't startle me, didn't announce himself. "I've been thinking," he said, placing his keys down with care, as if noise might break something delicate between us. I nodded, still folding. The paper made a soft, dry sound under my fingers. He didn't rush. He never rushed when he thought he was being reasonable. He leaned against the counter, eyes calm, voice steady. The kind of calm that feels rehearsed. "Mom's done a lot for us," he said. "For me." The invoices slid into alignment. I tapped the edges until they were straight. "She's proud of what you've built," he continued. "And I think it's important she's recognized." Recognized. The word felt harmless, almost kind. I waited. He filled the space with silence, letting the idea settle like it already belonged there. "She should have ownership," he added. "Some share. Something official. Ownership." That one landed heavier. I looked up then. He smiled, soft and reassuring. The smile he used when he thought I'd understand. When he thought the right words could smooth everything out. "It's only fair," he said. "After everything she's done." I thought of the nights I stayed late, counting change with tired hands. The holidays spent standing over a sink. The loans with my name pressed deep into the paper. I thought of the quiet work, the invisible kind, the kind no one clapped for. "What about me?" I asked. My voice surprised me. It was steady, clear. He blinked just once, as if the question hadn't occurred to him. "Of course," he said quickly. "You know this isn't taking anything from you." He reached for a folder on the counter. I hadn't noticed it before. Tan, slightly worn at the corners. He opened it carefully, like it held something important. "There are papers," he said. "Nothing finalized yet." "Not yet, but close enough to be certain." He spoke about percentages, about titles, about how it would look. He spoke as if the future were a room he'd already walked through without me. I watched his mouth move, listened to the rhythm of explanation. It all sounded very calm, very logical, like a weather report you can't argue with. "At the end of the day," he said, "this is about family." Family, another word that asked me to step aside. I noticed then that he still hadn't asked what I wanted. Not once. Not even gently. The room felt smaller. The light shifted as a cloud passed, dimming the counter where the folder lay open. I stared at the papers inside. Blank spaces waiting for signatures. My signature. "How long have you been talking about this?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just enough." "A while," he admitted. It made sense. Sense.to whom. I sat down at the small table near the window. The chair creaked like it remembered every other time I'd leaned into it, exhausted. I placed my hands flat on the surface, feeling the grooves worn smooth by years of use. "I built this," I said quietly. He nodded. "I know," but he said it like a kindness, not a fact. "I signed the loans," I went on. "I worked the hours. I kept it afloat when it wasn't sure it would survive." He listened, but his eyes drifted back to the folder. "I'm not saying you didn't," he replied. "This doesn't change that. It changed everything, I just didn't say it yet." He talked about honoring his mother, about easing her mind, about how much it would mean to her. Each word carefully placed, like stepping stones across water. I realized then that the decision had already been made. The conversation wasn't for permission. It was for acceptance. My chest felt tight, but my voice stayed calm. I asked practical questions. Legal ones. He answered confidently, already prepared. No one raised their voice. No one accused. No one apologized. That was the hardest part. I stood and walked to the permits on the wall. Ran my fingers over the edges. My name's still there. Ink unbroken. I need time, I said. He smiled, relieved. Of course. Take all the time you need. But time, I understood, was already moving without me. He left shortly after, the door closing with the same soft final sound I'd heard before. The refrigerator hummed. The building exhaled. I sat alone with the folder still open on the counter. The dust had settled. The light had shifted again. Everything looked the same. And yet, I felt it then clearly, unmistakably. This was the moment. Not the loud kind. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet one. The moment when what I built began slipping out of my hands, not because I let go, but because no one asked me to hold on. I closed the folder gently and placed it face down. Outside, the sky darkened toward evening. Inside, the room waited. And I stayed there a while longer, listening to the silence, trying to understand how something so carefully made could be claimed without ever being touched. The lock turned slower than usual that night, metal catching, then giving way. The sound echoed through the empty room like it had something to say back to me. I stepped inside and didn't turn on the lights right away. The restaurant held the last warmth of the day, the kind that lingers in wood and brick. Outside, the street had gone quiet. Inside, everything waited. I stood there with my coat still on, keys cold in my palm, listening to the place breathe. This room had known me at my best and at my most tired. It had watched me doubt and continue anyway. On the counter sat the folder, still face down, exactly where I'd left it. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the small table by the window. The chair creaked like it remembered every other late night I'd asked it to hold me. The glass sweated onto the wood, leaving a faint ring I didn't bother to wipe away. I opened the folder then. The papers were neatly arranged. Typed language. Clean margins. Words like transfer and percentage and recognition. My husband's handwriting appeared in the margins, small notes, reminders. His mother's name printed clearly, confidently, like it had always belonged there. My name was at the bottom, waiting. I traced the line where my signature would go, the paper smooth beneath my finger. I thought of all the other times I'd signed without hesitation. Loans. Permits. Agreements made in faith. Those signatures had felt heavy, but honest. This one felt different. This one asked for something back. I remembered his voice from earlier, calm and reasonable. How he'd said it would keep the peace. How he'd framed it as gratitude, as fairness. How silence had followed my refusal, thick and surprised. He hadn't argued that he hadn't asked again. That silence stayed with me now, louder than any raised voice. It felt like distance, already measured. I folded the papers carefully and slid them back into the folder. Closed it. Placed it inside the drawer beneath the counter where I kept old menus and spare pens. I pushed the drawer shut until it clicked. For a moment, I sat very still. The restaurant didn't feel like a prize anymore. It felt like a mirror. Every surface reflected something I hadn't wanted to see all at once. The way I'd learned to make myself smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. I stood and walked the length of the dining room, my footsteps soft. I ran my hand along the backs of chairs, the grain worn smooth by years of use. I remembered choosing each one, carrying them in myself, tightening loose screws when no one else noticed. I paused by the permits on the wall. My name still printed clearly. Undeniable. I touched the corner of one, feeling the lamination beneath my fingertips. This was mine. So was the cost. I thought of peace. How often I'd chosen it by stepping aside, by swallowing words, by letting other people decide what was reasonable. And I thought of myself, the person I'd been before everything was shared, before dreams needed approval. I knew then that I couldn't keep both. The realization didn't come with anger. It came with clarity, quiet and steady, like finally setting something down after carrying it too long. I finished my water and rinsed the glass, set it upside down to dry. The routine felt grounding, familiar. I turned off the lights one by one. The room dimmed slowly, corners softening, shadows stretching. The kitchen last. Always the kitchen last. At the door, I paused. Looked back once more. The table stood ready. The chairs aligned. Everything in its place. I took the keys from my pocket and locked the door. The sound was final this time, but not cruel. Just honest. Outside, the night air was cool against my face. I stood there a moment, feeling it settle on my skin. The streetlight hummed above me, steady and indifferent. I didn't know exactly what would come next. Conversations. Papers. Consequences. I knew there would be loss, one way or another. But I also knew this. The question was never who deserved the restaurant. .it was who deserved the life it cost to build. I walked to my car without looking back, keys warm in my hand now, carrying with me the quiet certainty of what I would no longer give away.